All right, so hello, welcome everybody. Let me go ahead and share my screen here so you can all see what I am doing. Okay, can those of you who are looking at the screen see the little background we got here? Okay, awesome. All right, welcome everybody to this Eclipse and Mars Retrograde webinar. I'm Alexander Creek. For those of you, I think most of you know me, but just in case you're listening to this somewhere and you don't know who I am, I'm an astrologer and an intuitive. So, I do astrology charts, astrology readings, talk to the stars, and I also I do intuitive readings as well, where I connect to your energy, talk to your spirit guides, and that kind of thing. But this is going to be focused on the former half of what I was talking about, because we are talking about the upcoming cycles that we really have this fall and winter. And really, arguably, I think probably, I would say like the crunchiest, and I'm saying crunchy just because it is more kind of difficult energy. Doesn't mean it has to be difficult for you personally, but just kind of collectively, there is going to be something in the air for this fall. I do want to say, kind of going into this, I do feel like we're going to have a really big energy shift come spring 2023. Not that it's going to be all roses and like an incredible, amazing, but I feel like the intense pressure cooker we've been in for like the past 2+ years, we're definitely going to have a significant energy shift. Just with Pluto going into Aquarius, Mars finally getting done with this horribly long retrograde cycle, and I just kind of feel like things may start to lighten up in those parts of our charts that that all this stuff is going on in. So, okay. So let me move here. This up, so y'all. Okay. So number one, let's talk about Mars and Gemini first, because it's important to kind of get a good handle on this Mars and Gemini stuff before we go into the eclipses. And those of you, and I did kind of note in the, I noted in the kind of information, maybe to have your chart handy as we go through this. If you don't have your chart handy, that's fine. And if you don't know your rising or ascendant, that's fine too. I'm going to talk a lot about that, because knowing your rising sign is really important for kind of finding out what area of life this is triggering for you. If you don't know your rising sign, go ahead and just like in the information I talked about, when you cast your astrology chart, maybe you listen to this later, go ahead and do time unknown or sunrise chart and go with when I'm talking about if your rising is this, just listen for your sun sign. But those of you who know your rising sign, pay attention kind of as we talk about this. So Mars retrograde in Gemini. So Mars is basically spending a really long time in this one sign. Mars is the planet of action, energy, passion, and conflict. And usually Mars spends about 2 months in a given sign before it moves on to something else. And in this case, Mars is going to be in Gemini for 7 months. So it's been spending a lot of time in this sign already. And that means Mars has been in one part of your chart for quite a while at this point. So Mars represents themes like the warrior, the pioneer, the entrepreneur. It represents our drive, how we initiate things, and how we stand up for ourselves. Mars also represents sexual energy, not the sort of come hither, magnetic kind of Venus energy. Mars is like when you're in the heat of the moment, you like grab somebody, like that feeling. Mars is heat and it's fire. So it also represents that, Mars is kind of like the gas in our, I've kind of read it as like the gas in our tank. It's sort of like our batteries, it's our energy. And Mars goes retrograde about every 26 months or every 2 years, kind of depending. And when any planet retrogrades in astrology, and I will also preface this by saying, before I even talk about this, I noticed there was a lot of panic online during this past Mercury retrograde about how there were like 6 planets in retrograde and everyone was freaking out. I have to say the only ones that really I like super notice during their entire time while they are retrograde, that is my cat throwing up. Everybody, I am hearing that as well as I talk. So maybe that's significant, maybe not, but wow. So it's crazy. Just ignore the retching sounds you'll hear in the background as I talk about Mars retrograde. But I'm going to say the only planets that I really feel the entire time it is retrograding are the personal planets, Mercury, Venus, and Mars. The other planets, they are important while they are retrograde, but the other planets, we feel that energy more when they station. So when they stop moving kind of in our vantage point in the sky, like right now, the planet Saturn is stationing direct. So there has been this sense maybe over the past couple of days and over the next several days of our senses of limitation and delays in work and responsibility. Oh good, we don't hear the cat throwing up. That's good. So, however, the entire time of Mercury, Venus, or Mars retrograde feels significant. So when a planet retrogrades, we reassess, we rethink, or we review the areas of life associated with that planet's energy. So in Mars's case, we are going to confront our drives and actions associated with Mars. And, when Mars retrogrades, it's like if you have been pushing and pushing and pushing and grinding, you really cannot proceed the same way and expect to get the same results. You really can't do things the usual way. The things that are ruled by Mars. So our initiative, our drive in expressing our anger. So, okay, so Mars will be retrograde. Its technical retrograde cycle will be from October 30th, so about Halloween time, and then will be retrograde until January 12th. But really, this whole period of time it's in retrograde, I'm going to kind of consider to be this important phase. So it finally leaves Gemini in late March. So with things like anger and passion, if you repress it, and if your normal kind of modality is to repress it, is to hold your tongue, it tends to explode during a Mars retrograde. And you may be feeling that now because Mars is basically, it stopped moving essentially at this point. It's basically retrograde, even though it's technically not there yet. You could still feel that. I heard from my mom the other day, like I think she's on this call, because I was telling her, I was like, yeah, Mom, Mars is retrograded in your 10th house. Like you really need to be careful at work, just because like if, or you should just notice that you may be more pissed off than normal at work or in career, or essentially, or with authority figures. And I heard from her like the next day, like, guess you had like a temper tantrum. So this can be useful. During Mars retrograde, you may just notice some things like, do I repress my anger? Do I hold things back? However, if your tendency is to that it can explode, so you may want to note to use tact or diplomacy. So Mars also tends to speed up and energize what it touches in astrology, because again, Mars is like the gas in your tank, it's energy. So Mars is going to be in Gemini this whole time. So Mars and Gemini can represent, Gemini is like communications, it's dialogue, it's conversation, it's learning and studying and really quick thinking energy. Gemini also represents multiple, so it can be doing, multiple things at once. So ever since Mars has gone into Gemini, I've kind of like looked at Twitter, like, is there more Twitter drama than normal? Like, are there more online back and forth in bickering than normal? And what I've also noticed is my own thought process has like sped way up, because Mars and Gemini just tend to speed up your thought processes. There's like 20 things happening all at once. And it's not always helpful. Sometimes, I'll have all these thoughts like, should I do this thing? Should I do this thing? Should I do this thing? How about this thing? It's like a squirrel brain kind of energy. So especially with this retrograde energy, you may consciously want to slow down your thought process. You may want to notice your thoughts instead of just engaging with every single one of them, noticing, is this thought helpful? Or is this my brain just spitting out random bullshit that I don't really need to pay attention to? This is really good time for journaling, for writing things down, or even like I need to get a big whiteboard just so I can write down all the things kind of going through my brain, because I have a lot of Gemini energy in my chart anyway. So just kind of getting things out of your brain space and onto paper, onto your computer where you can see it, or just kind of organizing your thoughts. I would also watch if you are someone who is prone to anxiety or prone to intrusive thoughts or just prone to hyperactivity. You really may want to watch stimulants in your caffeine intake during this transit, because Mars and Gemini can kind of fry your nervous system a little bit more. So just kind of pay attention to that. And you may also just find yourself in general, like, this is a lot about communication in the throat chakra, speaking your truth. Like, if you're the type to kind of shy away from a heated debate or like some kind of verbal or written confrontation during this transit, you may find yourself engaging in it in some way, or even having like an imaginary fight inside your brain. You just may notice that Mars warrior energy alongside communication and dialogue. So general advice when Mars is retrograde, in general, like, again, this is not the time to push, to grind away and expect to get the same result. So wherever Mars is in your chart, which we will talk about in the next slide or two, I'm going to help you kind of figure out where that energy is happening for you. This is where you want to rethink and reassess stuff. Again, this is, not pushing and expecting to find the same result. In general, Mars stuff, this is a time to kind of rest a little bit, to chill a little bit, to take the time that you need for yourself. If you find yourself full of energy, that's great. But in general, kind of like the classic cautionary tales with Mars retrograde is when it comes to like launching and initiating things, especially connected to like career and business endeavors, I can't say to you, don't launch anything, because sometimes when the time is right, the time is just right. However, if you do launch or initiate something while Mars is retrograde, maybe expect that it might go slower than normal, that you might make some readjustments. I wouldn't expect this whole explosive big thing, because when Mars is retrograde, it's time to kind of go inward. It's more of a time of like planning or rethinking or reassessing things, rather than like, I'm going to launch this big, huge, gigantic endeavor. If you can, one of the kind of classic things is if you can avoid like an elective surgery. Obviously, if you need to get surgery during this time, I'm not a medical professional also, so this is not medical advice, so do not take it as such. However, Mars rules surgery because Mars rules cutting and separating, anything related to knives. So if it's, like a cosmetic thing, if it's something that can possibly wait, you may want to wait, just because things like recovery times and things they say can kind of take a little bit longer, or the results cannot, or the results are maybe not as like expected. Also, lawsuits. If you're going to take legal action or sue someone, you may want to wait until Mars is direct, because quite often times it's sort of like the person who initiates or is the aggressor kind of does not have the advantage with Mars retrograde. So in some sort of legal situation, you may want the other party to act first. I don't know why. This is like advice I've just read 1,000 times over in different astrology books when it comes to Mars retrograde. So there you have it. Anything related to like fitness and like working out, this may not be the best time to to think that you're gonna like transform and get your revenge body. Maybe start slow. This might be a time to kind of tweak things or to rethink things, or even to revisit an old fitness routine or to revisit something older, because retrograde is always about going back to something. So just during this time, just if you need the extra rest, just definitely give yourself that. Also, again, be careful with anything related to knives and cutting, especially because Gemini rules the hands. So if you are in the kitchen, if you are a chef, if you're a cook, really watch what the hell you're doing, because just a little bit more of a potential for cutting yourself or having an accident. So just really be careful when it comes to anything to do with that. Finally, if you have Aries or Scorpio very prominent in your birth chart, particularly in your sun, your moon, your rising, you're really going to feel this more than the other signs, because Mars is the ruler of Aries, and it is the traditional ruler of Scorpio. So myself, I'm a Scorpio rising. So I'm looking at this Mars retrograde and I'm like, okay, so Mars rules my 6th house. And this may be beyond the scope of this webinar, but you want to look at where Mars is in your chart, which is what I'm going to do now, but also where Mars rules your chart. So when you are looking at your birth chart, and we're going to look at my chart at the end, so I can kind of show you all these visuals, and you can kind of see, especially if you never looked at your birth chart before, You're going to look at what house Mars is transiting and what sign Mars and what houses Mars rules in your chart to determine where you're going to maybe feeling a little bit of a rethinking or reassessing or doing things differently. Again, this doesn't have to mean you're slowing down everything. It just means that you may have to do things a different way. For me, Mars is my chart ruler. It rules my chart. So Mars rules my first house of self, my identity, and my energy. So in this case, for me, I'm really going to be rethinking a lot of things in my life, I think. It also rules my sixth house of work. So I may have to rethink the energy I put into my work, what my kind of grind looks like. I might have to relook at my health habits. And it's also transiting through my eighth house of credits, debts, loans, inheritance, and taxes. So getting all those finances together, I'm definitely feeling that right now. So those are the topics that it's ruling for me. So if you have Aries rising, so we're going to do by sign. So this is kind of where Mars is kind of bringing up themes by sign. So if you have Aries rising, this is going to be really important. This is going to be very important for you. So you are going to be definitely looking at, okay, how do I operate in the world, my identity, my personal energy, even physical body stuff. And also for you, Mars is going to be transiting your third house. It's been there since August, so this should be a continuation of those themes. And these things are just going to intensify with Mars retrograding. So Mars is going to be in your third house. The third house represents your communication, your decision-making, your local community that you live in, short trips, and also people who feel like siblings or extended family. So this can be more motivation and energy, or just noticing, or noticing like maybe the stuff that you do with your siblings or extended family, those things come up, but also how you engage with your community. And really, I think I would watch your thought process and notice your thought process, because it's definitely going to be sped up. So again, maybe take time to slow down your thought process and really kind of think through, is this an important thought that I have? You may be also just interested. You may also be interested right now in just learning things, studying things, but that might take a little bit longer, or there might be delays just because of this Mars retrograde energy. Taurus, you're going to be rethinking stuff with money. So Taurus rising, this is in your second house. This is anything related to your earned income, like your paycheck, the money that you are like making yourself, anything related to your finances and your assets, like things that you have, things that you possess. You're going to be maybe rethinking about your spending and your budget. You may also be looking at because Mars when it's transiting your second house, is like, how do I make more money? Like, you might be motivated to earn more money, but because it's retrograde, you might be doing it in a different way. Or you might be looking at multiple streams of income, because again, Gemini means multiples. Gemini rising. So this is going to be important for you because it's in your first house. So this is all about, you're going to be rethinking your, it's not more rethinking. I would say during this whole Mars and Gemini transit, you might find yourself more assertive, more forceful, more apt to kind of go after what you want. But with Mars retrograde, you may find yourself just pulling back a little bit more. It might be time to rest a little bit more, be really wise with how you spend your energy. And this could also be, like you may find yourself just expressing anger a little bit more, just feeling it bubbling up a little bit more in your relationship to anger and passion. So I would say, don't hold it in, but also you may want to resist popping off at somebody. You may want to write it down beforehand, like write down your thoughts and then express them, things like that. For Cancer rising, this is going to be in your 12th house. So Mars in your 12th house, this is the house it's an interesting house because it's about rest and retreat in places of isolation, along with your subconscious beliefs and your mental health. So I would definitely pay attention again to your thoughts. Are these thoughts that you really want to engage with, or do you just want to like let this pass you by? Because the 12th house can also be the place of self-undoing and kind of how you sabotage yourself. So you may be kind of confronting, I would say kind of confronting some old demons is kind of what it feels like. And definitely, like, I would say really taking time to self-soothe, self-care, go outside, be in nature, be in places where you have some time to just kind of be and exist. But also because it is Gemini, just again, note like anything around kind of random anxieties that would pop up because they're not always for you to listen to. So I definitely see you doing some kind of mental health processing. For Leo rising, this is in your 11th house. So you could be rethinking how you spend your energy on different, on like the groups that you associate with, casual friends, who like your allies or colleagues, and also how you spend your energy online, because the 11th house is online communities. You may also be kind of like going after differently or rethinking your wishes and hopes for the future as well, kind of what you manifest in what you want to bring to your life. You may be rethinking it. It could be going back to the drawing board or kind of deciding what you really want to spend your time and energy on. Because that is a lot of Mars retrograde, is deciding, what do I want to spend my time and energy on? It is finite. I don't have 8 days a week. So I only have so many hours a day. So this kind of category is what you may be thinking about a little bit more. Virgo rising, like I was talking about with my anecdote about my mom, this is Mars is going to be retrograding your 10th house of career, of your public reputation, of your worldly ambitions and authority figures. So this is going to be more about rethinking kind of, again, if you're holding an anger at work, if you're holding an anger at career, this could be your dealings with your bosses or authority figures. You're also your connection to your ambition. It could be like, what goals do I want to achieve that kind of have to do with my career? It's like, how do I assert myself in my drive in the workplace? And it's not necessarily about it's not like just your day job. It's more about your big worldly career, like what like the long-term kind of goal is. So again, I would kind of watch, although this could be good, I would watch anger and just kind of, again, tactfully express it versus just kind of blowing up on someone. But again, that also might be useful to you. So Libra, Libra rising. Mars is retrograde in your 9th house. So anything having to do with higher education, your spirituality, long distance trips, there's going to be more effort here, or you may have to do things a different way. So could be rethinking your higher education track, could be rethinking anything having to do with classes, could be anything having to do with your spirituality or what you're teaching, anything related to travel. 9th house can also be publishing and broadcasting and legal matters. For Scorpio, like I was kind of talking about myself, this is, again, anything having to do with other people's money and resources and backing. So loans that you've taken out, like this is like a great time to this is a decent time to refinance things. However, with Mars retrograde, you just have to put in a little bit more effort. There's like a few more steps you have to take. It's not like the smoothest road. Like a retrograde just kind of means there are more hiccups and bumps. But you may be looking at, looking at your investments, looking at your retirement. And this could also be, Mars can represent conflict. So this can be conflict over, inheritances, legacies, that kind of thing, or having some conflict over these areas. However, by the time Mars goes direct, it's sort of like, okay, we've maybe resolved some of these hiccups or some of these things from the past have kind of come back for us to kind of finish and finalize and resolve. So this is like a time that like, okay, I need to file those old taxes. I need to be looking at all this kind of, all this money stuff. So definitely money stuff. And it's a really private area of your chart. The 8th house also has to do with matters of death. And so it could be more of like this spiritual time. However, I've seen most 8th house things having to do with the money and financial kind of component. Sagittarius, this is in your relationship sector. So, looking at relationship dynamics, how do I normally interact in relationships? I would definitely, it's like putting, Mars retrograde is kind of putting your foot on the brake a little bit. So this is not a great time to initiate a new relationship, just straight up. It's just not. It could be that if you do initiate like a new relationship, it may take some time to kind of kick in, or it may take some time to kind of establish that dynamic. But also I would say looking at how you are in conflict in relationships, or how you put energy into them. And this is, romantic partners, best friends, roommates. This is also your adversaries. So if you have an arch enemy, definitely this relationship could kind of take a turn. I would say it's, when I say adversary, if you are legally, if you are in, if you are suing someone, basically, this could be a time when you can just kind of notice that dynamic shift. And this is not, again, a great time for you to actively sue someone until this retrograde is done. Capricorn, you're going to feel this energy. Maybe, I mean, I would say a little bit of frustration, maybe around work things. So it could be coworkers, people that work for you, anyone in your work sphere. You could be rethinking or redoing how you work, like your work grind, kind of what that looks like. Could also have to do with physical health. So it's just kind of like, okay, how am I taking care of my physical body? How am I kind of managing physical health things? And then also things could be coming up with your pets as well, and just kind of having to deal with pets. Like when Mars is retrograde, we're just a little bit more aggravated about where about what area of life it's talking about. So Aquarius rising, your kids could piss you off a little bit more. I'm not gonna lie here. Your kids could just aggravate you a little bit more, or there's just maybe some issues surrounding children. This is also, you might be rethinking how you pursue dating or romance. If you've been like neglecting your creativity, you could be like, I really want to have time to just create and play and recreate, essentially. So it could be areas around that as well. Pisces rising finally. So this has to do with your home, with your family of origin, with real estate matters, and really like kind of like your home base, essentially. So, we could just be spending a lot of time getting ready for something. I know Pisces rising, I think Mars is in her fourth and she's getting ready to like have a baby. So it's just a lot of energy like in the home, like getting things ready. But again, it could be like a little bit more just spending more energy or having to kind of rethink your energies related to your home and your family. So finally, getting to the eclipses. And we'll have plenty of times for questions and stuff at the end, but did anyone have a burning question they just want to ask about now or something not clear? You can go ahead and either unmute yourself or you can go ahead and chat before we get into this portion.
Can I ask one question real quick of because like what do you feel about the pre-retrograde period of because I know people talk about like the shadow of Mercury retrograde. Is there a shadow period for all the planet retrogrades then?
Yeah, there is. I would kind of more just consider Mars getting all the way through Gemini, and then I think because it's basically the shadow period. So like if Mars goes retrograde at 25, remember, oh my God, I just had this in my head. It basically Mars just has to get through Gemini, essentially. So it really, Mars is the whole kind of trek through Gemini we kind of associate with the shadow period, because I think it goes direct at 8 degrees. So it's basically anything from 8 to 25 is going to be kind of considered shadow period. So I would definitely pay attention to shadow period stuff, because really we can kind of feel the retrograde energy coming in before it even slows down, essentially. Like the stuff that we've kind of encountered when Mars went into Gemini in August, it's like, ooh, money stuff came up for me. Like, oh shit, like expenses and all this other stuff. So really kind of this whole trek through Gemini is just a little bit more complicated because of this retrograde. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it totally does. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. So I would say, the retrograde period is technically done by, what did I say, July or January 12th. Remember, I think it was January 12th. But really kind of, it has to get through most of Gemini, if not just all the way to Cancer, for us to be like, whoo, okay, done with that. So anyway, pardon my language. Anyway, but it's Mars and Gemini. So, an F word is going to be dropped occasionally. So, okay. And really, and again, as of recording this, and this ties into the eclipses that we were talking about, Mars is basically station retrograde, even though it's not quite there, but it's really moving super, super slow. And again, it's not astronomically moving slow. It's just from our vantage point on Earth, and it looks like it's slowing down and will stop and change directions. Because we actually know, we know some astronomy. So, okay. So the eclipses. So eclipses in astrology are supercharged and potent new and full moons. And eclipses tend to arrive in pairs, and they also occur along the nodes of the moon. Speaking of astronomy, astronomically, I always forget what the nodes are. It's something that had to do with the moon's orbit, but astrologically, they're super important. So I'm just going to throw that out there. So eclipses tend to be much more disruptive and unpredictable than regular new and full moons. And they have this more faded energy, and they do coincide, excuse me, with major endings and beginnings in our lives. And it's also helpful looking back at the eclipses that we had this spring. It was April 30th and May 16th, we had a solar eclipse in Taurus and a lunar eclipse in Scorpio, respectively. So these eclipses coming up now are definitely have to do with those themes then, because eclipses really tell a story, essentially. It's kind of like, eclipses really are more about surrender, because we're looking at literally, and this is, kind of, especially from like the ancients' perspective, kind of, who developed astrology, they're looking at the sun literally disappearing, the sun representing our life force, our vitality. They're looking at the moon literally disappearing. So they saw eclipses more as like ominous omens. I don't really see them as particularly ominous necessarily, but they definitely are more dramatic. Dramatic doesn't have to mean bad though, but definitely more, there is again, like this faded feeling, like I mentioned. And again, they coincide with major beginnings and endings in our lives. I will say in the era of TikTok and everything else, there's a lot of advice, some of it good, some of it terrible on the internet about like intention setting and magic and stuff that you can do with the new and full moons. I would not really recommend magical workings, kind of setting big manifestations or charting your crystals, or, I wouldn't recommend those things on an eclipse. I think it's fine if you're doing energy work on yourself or praying, or, or even just asking for support from your guides. But if you're like, I want a specific thing and I'm going to use the energy of the eclipse to help make it happen, I would say no, because eclipses have a more inflammatory feeling to them and they are very unpredictable. So the energy that you're kind of working with, if you do magic or anything like that, it just is a little bit more unpredictable. Energetically, we can feel energized and buzzed from eclipses, but we can also feel drained and heavy. And you think about a regular full moon, and regular full moon, sometimes I'm just like, I can't sleep, or I just have all this stuff coming up, or but eclipses just have a more intense feeling to them. And eclipses are a time of surrendering and letting go, of letting the universe kind of do its work and do its magic. And this is also a time when, eclipses are really kind of like, especially if it touches a major point in your birth chart, this is sort of like the hand of fate kind of intervening. And there are some times where I think, yes, we totally create everything in our lives. And sometimes as an astrologer, I'm like, I think some of the stuff we signed up for before we even incarnated. So sometimes you're just not in control of your life. And this is time to really surrender to spirit, and ask your spirit guides and your angels for support. So if an eclipse, again, touches a major point in your chart within about 4 degrees, kind of give or take, this definitely is a major injection of energy and activation in your life that have to do with that chart point or planet. And the events that eclipses trigger tend to happen. They can happen before an eclipse. They can happen also a little bit after. I've noticed it more like the lead up or the build up. And oftentimes with eclipses, it's like we can kind of see the thing coming, or like, for example, this spring. So I'm Scorpio rising, I'm Taurus sun. So I had eclipses across my first house of self and my 7th house of relationships. The energy at the time, the aspects of my chart were definitely more about separation, about redefinition. It was not pleasant energy. And what happened? Oh, look, I split with my live-in boyfriend at the time. So it was very traumatic, very transformative. I had all these endings, but also these new beginnings that happened because of that. So I'm kind of living this whole new life, weirdly, whole new city, it's, crazy. Eclipse, right? So, but this stuff kind of happened as a lead up to these eclipses. Like I saw these eclipses coming and I'm like, I wonder what's happening in relationships. Maybe we'll like get engaged. It was the opposite. So, but again, at the same time, these are things that needed to happen in my life. These are things that really serve my highest and best good, because the endings, if you have endings in your life around eclipses, they do tend to be permanent. They tend to be things that are really no longer serving you. So I just wanted to mention a little bit, if you notice that in your birth chart, and we'll talk about these degrees in a minute here, if you notice that in your birth chart that you have 2 degrees of Scorpio in your sun, moon, or rising, or any of these planets here, or if you have 16 degrees of Taurus in any of these stuff here, or 4 degrees either way, then this eclipse is definitely activating something in your chart. So just really quick here, if an eclipse aspects your sun, again, very tightly within a few degrees, this is going to show up more in your general vitality, your energy, your creativity, and life force. And this also may show up if it's more of a flowing aspect, like a trine or a sextile, it can be really helpful energy. If it's something more challenging, like a square or an opposition, and again, this is a little bit more advanced astrology, so no worries if you don't get this part, that's totally fine. Then you can maybe notice some stuff kind of going on with that might be more of a challenge to you, or more of like a helpful energy, depending on the aspect. The sun also rules men in general. So let's say that you have like a sun, that something is squaring your sun in an eclipse. That could mean like your relationship with partner or father or some sort of important male figure might be strained, or they might have something going on in their lives. The moon, if an eclipse aspects your moon in your chart, it's definitely going to bring up themes relating to your emotions, what makes you feel safe and nurtured, your home, your family. It can have literally to do with your mother or your caretaker, or the women in your life in general, or like the femme people in your life in general, if they identify as more like non-binary or something like that. That's kind of definitely a new dimension in astrology to figure out. I'm like, where did not like this? What is this non-binary person represented in this chart? Is it the sun or the moon, or is it Venus or something else? So if it's something touches your Mercury, anything relating to communication, contracts, and legal things, your mental energy, transportation, and siblings, and of course, whatever Mercury is ruling in that chart. Venus, anything relating to love, sex, pleasure, relationships, how you treat yourself. Again, if it's a hard aspect, it might be like, oh, I can't really treat myself right now. I might have to tighten the belt a little bit. Or if it's like a positive thing, it can definitely be, it can definitely lend some kind of positive energy to these areas that I mentioned. If it is your Mars, and has to do with your action, your energy, your batteries in the tank, your physical energy, and how you approach conflict. Jupiter, it's anything related, can be anything related to expansion, to opportunities, to abundance and travel and higher learning and spirituality, but it can also be excess and overdoing things. Saturn, if there's an eclipse on your Saturn, you can feel the weight of responsibility. You can feel that status ambition, worldly things, your career and business, but also feelings of delays and limitation. If you have an eclipse aspecting your ascendant, and opposing your ascendant is something called the descendant. So your ascendant is you, your identity, and your personal energy. Opposing that is your descendant. So that's more about the relationships and people in your lives. You also have something called the MC, or the midheaven, and the IC, which I can't pronounce because it is something in Latin. So the MC has to do with the highest point in your chart. So it's your career, your legacy, what you're known for. The IC is the lowest point in your chart. Has to do with your home, your family, your private kind of home base space. So things coming up with that, if those are being aspected in the chart as well. So, and again, I'm going to kind of show you at the end kind of how to look for these things using my chart as an example. Looks like I might have a question here. Pluto. Oh, okay. So when asked about Pluto, I don't pay attention to the outer planets as much because they're more abstract. However, if you have an eclipse on your Pluto, and I would say it has to be really close, really, really close. Not within 4 degrees, I would say take a degree. Pluto can represent intensity and obsession, power dynamics, control, things like that. Uranus, if you have an eclipse on Uranus, and I would really, really tight with that degree. If you have an eclipse on Uranus, it's about, it could be about liberation, rebellion, disrupting the structures of your life, suddenly kind of wanting to break out of structures that hold you back, or strokes of brilliance or genius. And Neptune, if you have an eclipse on your Neptune, it could be that you're feeling spiritually inspired, that you're feeling compassionate, that you want to serve others. Exact degree for you. Interesting. Okay. That you are inspired, you want to serve others, or that you have, that your intuitive gifts open up, because Neptune is a planet of spirituality in the other realms. It can also be that you feel confused, that things feel foggy, that you feel disillusioned, or that you have your rose-colored glasses on. So when you have an eclipse in your Neptune, it's important to make sure that you are seeing things as they are. So I hope that makes sense. Okay. So solar eclipse in Scorpio happening basically right now, which I kind of forgot about, which is of course, I'm like, oh, maybe I was meant to do this, at this time, right? But basically in, I believe the early morning or afternoon, but basically the buildup is right now as of October 24th. Technically it's happening on October 25th. The solar eclipse in Scorpio is at 2 degrees in the sky. So you may want to look for around 2 degrees of Scorpio where you have that going on in your chart. So a solar eclipse. Solar eclipses do tend to be about new beginnings, but they also may coincide with permanent or major endings. That's the thing with eclipses, beginnings and endings. The new beginnings around a solar eclipse tend to show up over time. It's like a seed that is planted that blooms over the next few months. Oftentimes we are doing things at eclipses that we're beginning that we have no idea that will become significant in the future. It's really interesting looking back. And I'm like, I had an eclipse on that date. And I just signed a form that was for this new business and I had no idea it was going to be a thing. And it's that kind of energy. Eclipses, a solar eclipse, I think you'll definitely feel that energy. However, actually don't listen to that last statement. I'll kind of get to that in a second. I think I'm 2 slides ahead in my brain. So again, like I said before, this eclipse is a continuation of themes that began this spring with these 2 eclipses in Taurus and Scorpio. We had an eclipse in Taurus in late 2021, but this eclipse energy, I don't think really kicked in until you're starting a tarot and astrology business officially. Good for you. That's exciting. Good for you. That's awesome. I wonder where that's at. We'll have to find out where that is in your chart. And like I said before, if you're initiating something right now, it's like, don't get it in your head like, I shouldn't do something because blah, 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 Mars retrograde. It's just that you may notice that it's what you're initiating is different, or you may be like needing, it's like once you start, it's like, okay, I'm doing this offering, but I may need to change this or kind of rethink this or like kind of redo something or tweak. So I would just say that with you starting your, okay, cool. Okay, cool. Okay, anyway. So this eclipse, the solar eclipse is on the south node. So it's near the south node. The south node in astrology represents what we are letting go of, what we are purging, what we are clearing. And so this solar eclipse can maybe feel like more of a clearing away or a letting go more so than like crazy new beginnings, or it's that there is a clearing out or letting go that is happening for you, some sort of emotional release before we have these new beginnings kind of coming in. So Scorpio represents power, secrets, getting to the heart of the matter, death and transformation. And, Scorpio is a no bullshit sign. If you have Scorpio prominently in your chart, you kind of have a built-in bullshit detector. And Scorpio is a water sign. So it's highly emotional, it's intense, it's intuitive, psychic. It is also a fixed sign, like Taurus, like Leo and Aquarius. So Scorpio, it's this very determined sign. It can be very stop at nothing, and it can have a hard time letting go of things sometimes. And Scorpio is really learning to trust in this lifetime. So with this particular eclipse, in the collective energy, we may be confronting deep emotions or grief or issues relating to things like intimacy or trust or buried truths or secrets. But also it's sort of like deep transformation and ultimately healing, but it feels like there's almost like a cauterization of a wound or ripping off a Band-Aid before that healing can occur. It's like draining out the poison before the new beginnings kind of can come in, is essentially kind of, it's like, I just see this image of sucking up the poison. It's kind of what that is looking like for me. So it's like you may be looking back and clearing things away in order to move forward. This eclipse is interesting for a couple reasons. That's why I was like, I'm doing a webinar or something, because there's a lot going on here. So this eclipse in the sky, the sun and the moon will be conjunct Venus, like right next to it. So it's going to be conjunct Venus, which is also it's in the sign of Scorpio. So Venus has to do with love, relationships, harmony, pleasure, and beauty. And Venus in Scorpio is traditionally it's not her natural home, because Scorpio is this place of, it's like love is a battlefield with Venus in Scorpio. It's the place of deep longing and where we encounter like trust issues and deep intense desires and this things real. It's not this lighthearted Venus in Libra energy. We just came out of Venus in Libra Monday today. So we went from kind of lighthearted Venus energy, let's like connect and have fun, to now Venus is in Scorpio. So with this eclipse, it's sort of going to be about who in my life do I trust? What are the relationships that really serve me? And it's just not this lighthearted kind of Venus energy. So, themes around the depth in your relationships, around trust and intimacy, around sharing things, and also around self-worth, because Venus can be about self-worth, and also pleasure and beauty will be very prevalent in this eclipse. So there may be things that do come up with relationships. There may be clearing related to past relationships, or letting things go relating to past relationships, and also your relationship with money. Venus also is, it's a planet that it rules money and finances. So definitely things coming up with that, and also things maybe around your earning potential, things like that. Because this eclipse is in Scorpio, Mars is the traditional ruler of Scorpio. So we look to what that planet is doing at this time of the eclipse. In this case, Mars is basically, it's essentially stopped in Gemini. So this suggests that we are slowing down, that we are resting, that we are recharging, that we may be doing things in a different way, that we may be doing something totally different than what we have been doing before. The path forward through a lot of November may be unclear. If you are looking for a clear plan, details, what is the plan of action? Mars, while it is stationing retrograde and about to go backward, during a lot of November, Mars will be squaring Neptune. The square is a challenging aspect that prompts, it's like it has to prompt action. You're making a decision. It's squaring Neptune. Neptune is this planet of the higher realms. It's compassion and this like ethereal energy. When Mars squares Neptune, especially Mars in Gemini that wants to know the information, is squaring Neptune, it's sort of like the plan may be kind of vague, or we're not really sure where our direction is. So to me, I just kind of see this, and again, it's just sort of saying, I keep feeling I feel like I'm repeating myself. And also, it's funny, every time I talk about Neptune or this aspect, my mind just goes blank, which is essentially kind of what this aspect is. It's like, what is the plan? I don't really know what the plan is. Or you may have like a vague sense of like what you're going to do, but like those details may just have a hard time kind of filling. So keep that in mind with this eclipse and the energy around it. Also, because the eclipse ruler is Mars, stationing retrograde. Anything relating to your anger or your passion, if that has been kind of held back, or you're holding it in, it can kind of rip, like just kind of explode out of you a little bit more with this energy. Solar eclipse by sign. So this is by your rising sign. If you don't know your rising sign, or you don't have an accurate birth time, and I'm saying accurate, like if you ask your parent, they're like, I don't know, about 2 o'clock, that's not good enough. You need to find your birth record, baby book, bracelet that you had from the hospital, something like that, or your official birth certificate. Go with that, because oftentimes your parents have no idea. So, it's like you're finding your ascendant has to be done in a minute, because the ascendant changes every 2 hours. So enough for my Virgo moon being specific. So solar eclipse by sign. So Aries rising, these eclipses, both of them are going to be in your financial houses. So again, this could be, it's a solar eclipse. So it could be this solar eclipse of like letting things go, clearing out, or having something to do with your debts, credits, inheritances, anything, related to inheritances or legacies, and just getting all that tax kind of credit stuff kind of tied up. And also this could have this could also have an effect of, you could be aware of how you're transforming on an emotional level as well. Taurus, this is a big one for you because this is in one of your big kind of major angles of your chart. So this could be, again, a clearing out, a letting go of something relating to relationships, anything relating to romantic partnerships, best friends, how you're your relationship dynamic and how you approach relationship is definitely changing. You're definitely changing as an individual, because Uranus, the planet of disruption and upheaval, has been in your sign since 2018. So, it could be just that you're changing the way that you are in relationships, essentially, or that you're feeling a change in your relationship space. Gemini rising, this is you may be trying for some sort of new beginning in your work sector, anything having to do with your day job, anything relating to your physical body health, or anything even relating to small pets may kind of show up here as well. So there could be a clearing out or letting go, but there may be a new beginning kind of at the end here. I can feel myself getting more stepped up and more talk. Okay, so speaking of sixth house, Cancer rising. So you've probably been experiencing some new beginnings, and the previous signs I talked about too. You've probably been experiencing some beginnings in energy with the house that I am referring to. Someone asked for death transformation in Aries. Do you mean personal transformation or actual death, others dying? Thank you for mentioning that, because I forgot to mention that. It's more metaphorical, right? It is more metaphorical. However, if you have major planets or placements in the 8th house, you may find that topics of death do show up in your life. You could be a doula. You could be someone who helps bring people in. You could be a therapist. You could be working with people's deep emotions, or you could be working in what are the places where they you could be working in a funeral home, or you could be working as a medium. So it's more it's more about, if you don't have any planets there, it's more about it's usually about the metaphor of death versus the actual death. But if you have major planets in the 8th house, you could be, someone who just is dealing with these really deep issues, like sex, death, kind of what happens beyond closed doors, deep emotions, that kind of thing. That's kind of what I'm describing with the 8th house. So I hope that makes sense. Okay. So, where was I? So Cancer rising. So stuff relating to romance, sexual energy, creativity, your children or children in your life, your inner child, and pleasure. This could be that you're wanting a new beginning in this area, but it could be that you're having to clear something out or let something go before that new beginning can happen. Leo rising. So you've had stuff going on with your home and family and your career all year long. So this is kind of a purging or clearing out. Maybe it could be something relating to your attitudes, or something with your family in general. It could have something to do with your house, your real estate. And this could also be a time too for Leo rising to really to start doing ancestor work, to work with, those in your family that have passed on, and kind of ask for their wisdom and guidance as well. With Virgo rising, you're going to notice this energy in your 3rd house, which is the house of communication and decision making. Your mental processes. It has to do with your short trips and your errands, your kind of daily rituals as well, like your daily trip to your Starbucks, frankly, or your, it kind of your daily to-do list, and just kind of what you're doing every day and kind of your life. This also, things could be coming up with your siblings as well, or your extended family, or you could just notice that there's a lot of energy that you're putting into your local community as well. Libra rising, this kind of clearing away before a new beginning kind of energy is in your 2nd house of your finances. So this is your earned income, your paycheck, your budget, and your spending. You could be feeling like a need to slow down in this area, or need to kind of rethink and reassess. And also this is related to your self-worth and your values, and also just stuff, your stuff, what you have. Scorpio rising. So this is in your 1st house. So this is having to do with you're clearing away a lot. This has to do with your psyche, your identity, your personal energy, your physical body. You may notice that you throughout this year that you're changing a lot internally, externally. The South Node actually in your first house is actually good energy for releasing weight or like, releasing like the excess. So I definitely noticed that in myself. I'm like, okay, I'm a bit leaner, maybe because of stress, but it's there. And also your approach to life. So I would say, with this Scorpio eclipse in general, for everyone, there is a deep healing that is being offered, but it is sort of like taking a hard look at things, of clearing away and letting go and purging. So for you, I just kind of feel like if there's any, some beliefs about yourself that you have that are stuck around that are not serving, it is time to release them. And again, it doesn't have to be something that you're doing consciously. Just kind of notice what's happening in your life and kind of letting the universe kind of do its magic too. Sagittarius, stuff around your mental health, your subconscious beliefs that need to kind of rest and retreat, kind of get away from it all a little bit, or anything, or if you happen to spend a lot of time in places like big institutions like hospitals, it can also put emphasis on those kind of institutions in your life as well. Capricorn, this solar eclipse is in your 11th house. So for you this year, there's a lot going on between your friends and your allies, your online communities, clubs and organizations that you're a part of, your hopes, wishes, and goals. You could find those that like, what are my hopes, wishes, and goals right now? What do I want to focus on? You've also had a lot of activity in your 5th house this year. So anything having to do with romance, sex, creativity, and your children. So with any eclipse, you're going to be looking at your opposite house, which is going to be where the lunar eclipse is, which I'll get to in just a minute here. So a lot with the communities with the online communities that you belong to, with clubs and organizations, as well as your friends and allies. So this could be new beginnings in this area, but first there's a purging and clearing out that's going on. Aquarius. So, you may be releasing or letting go of like stuff relating to your career, your worldly ambitions. You could just find that your reputation is changing, that your relationship with authority figures in your life is just changing over this year, that there's maybe more of a focus on new beginnings on stuff at home. But with this solar eclipse in this part of your chart, it's like, what do I don't want to do anymore? What do I want to let go of where the new stuff in my career can flow in? Pisces rising. This has to do with you have been having a lot going on between your 3rd house of communication and learning and studying, and your 9th house of long distance travel, of higher education and spiritual understanding. So, again, it's like this also has to do with your beliefs as well, your beliefs, your worldview and your perspective. You could be thinking about maybe beginning something relating to publishing or broadcasting. This also has to do with legal matters as well, but it usually ends up being about your beliefs, your spirituality, and your education and travel with the 9th house. So any questions in general before I move on to lunar eclipse in Taurus? And again, we have more time for questions at the end. Okay, I think we're good. All right, so because eclipses come in pairs, we have a lunar eclipse in Taurus on November 8th. That is going to be about 16 degrees in Taurus. It's like 15 degrees, 59 minutes. I just like round up to 16 because it's easier. So a lunar eclipse, essentially a full moon on steroids, is more likely in a solar eclipse to coincide with a completion, or it's more likely to culminate with an event, right? Because it's a lunar eclipse, it's more likely to be something with a completion, a culmination, an event, awareness, news, or illumination in some area of your life. If there is an ending that with a lunar eclipse, it is likely to be permanent. The events, again, like kind of was talking about before, the events around a lunar eclipse may show up like before an eclipse happens, or after. I most noticed it before, but just kind of around this general time frame of the 8th. But I would definitely be looking on this day, kind of what's happening. Excuse me. Okay. So, again, look to your natal chart, look to your birth chart, and what house is Taurus ruling in your chart? What planets or points do you have around 16 degrees, give or take about 4 degrees either way? It's about, from about 12 degrees to 20 degrees of Taurus. Whoop, we'll get to that in a minute. Okay. So The North Node is in Taurus right now. So this eclipse is with the North Node. So the stuff in Taurus is, more likely to kind of coincide, like the house that the North Node is transiting through. That's kind of where you're going to find some new beginnings and some kind of life kind of breathed into your chart, or kind of this sort of faded new direction. If something leaves your life during this lunar eclipse, it's really not meant to be a part of your life for your highest and best good. Like the previous eclipse, this one's a little bit more stressed out. Just the collective weather around these eclipses in Mars retrograde is just more stressed out. Doesn't mean that that your life has to be chaos and disruption and all this kind of stuff. But just I want you to note that eclipses don't just impact you personally, impacts the world. So pay attention to the news and kind of what's going on around these eclipses. And, I noticed today, actually, there was this Leslie Jordan, this actor, this comedian, passed away today. And, as the sun and Venus enter Scorpio, as we have this eclipse coming. And of course, I looked at his chart, he was a Taurus sun. And I was like, isn't that interesting? Someone going out, during that eclipse kind of in their own sign. So just notice the news and kind of notice what's happening. Don't hook onto it or connect to it if you don't, if that's not serving you. But notice just the general energy. It's going to feel more tense around these eclipses because the astrological weather right now is just a bit crunchy. So keep in mind, during this lunar eclipse, Mars will be fully retrograde. And since this eclipse is in Taurus, Taurus is a fixed sign. It is concerned with the here and now, or excuse me, it's concerned with like what is long lasting and stable. We're going to be concerned with what is stable, secure, and nourishing to us, and all the stuff about the Taurus part of our chart. It's also important as well, and I didn't write this in this little PowerPoint here, that Venus is the ruler of Scorpio. So Venus represents money, it represents love and relationships, and also women in general and affairs connected to women. So, and also Taurus, it's food supplies, it is, kind of what nourishes and sustains us. Those things will definitely be very up in the air during this eclipse. Venus is going to be in Scorpio. I have to say, one thing is that this eclipse is on election day in the United States. So Venus being in Scorpio, it's kind of like women are pissed in general. Women, people, femme people, I feel like because Venus in Scorpio is about intensity and depth, I think there's going to be a rage connected to this eclipse. It's not, this is not an easy breezy kind of time. So I think that we're going to see some upsets, some reversals or surprises within our financial system, the stock market, currency, food supplies, and anything relating to women in general. Given that this is on election day in the United States, we might just see some reversals or surprises with the election, probably on both sides. But I feel like women and women's issues are going to continue to be a very, very important kind of focal point with this eclipse on this election, and just generally within the world, like women's rights and that kind of thing. So for you personally, this eclipse is going to be, like I mentioned a little bit, like I alluded to, this eclipse is going to be almost exactly conjunct to Uranus, the planet of surprises, disruption, rebellion, like reversals. It's just a very kind of anything can kind of happen energy. So for you personally, you might feel a sense of liberation or freedom or wanting to break out of structures that have confined you, relating to the house that Taurus rules in your chart. So for example, if this lunar eclipse is in your 7th, you may be really rethinking, like, why have I always done this thing in relationships? I've always done monogamy, now I want multiple boyfriends. Or I'm sick of men in general, or I've always acted this way in friendships, in my close friendships, and I'm really sick of doing that. Or that you may find yourself in relationship with people that are surprising, or that are very different, or that kind of stand apart from like the standard kind of person that you kind of dated, something like that. But Uranus energy it's different. It wants freedom and liberation. So at the same time. So we want, there's this energy around sudden events, around reversals and needing freedom with this eclipse. This eclipse is also making a difficult aspect to Saturn, which is the opposite basically of Uranus. So this eclipse is square Saturn. So this eclipse, we may be feeling, Saturn is the planet of limitation, delays, work, responsibility. Saturn is the planet of time. And it's like about like Saturn wants you to do the job well. It doesn't want you to rush through it. It's like, what's going to serve you long lasting? Like, don't do a shitty job building the thing that you're building. Make sure that you have solid structure in all of these things. So while Saturn is not a lot of fun, Saturn is the adult in the room, essentially. So while we may be feeling impatient, or there may be these sudden kind of changes with this Uranus energy, we may also be feeling pressure or the burden of responsibility, depending on where Saturn is moving through our chart. So it's like this interesting study of opposites. Can we feeling like we're under pressure about something, or that we're making an important decision, or that there is a breakdown of kind of familiar structures in our lives. Also, the last thing, we have had Saturn in Aquarius squaring Uranus in Taurus since 2021. We had a couple hits of that, and throughout 2021, we really saw a lot with our currency system, our financial system, our infrastructure. Our structures have really gone through a breakdown, and like the familiar rhythms of life really are kind of, it's like what is real? Like, what are the structures that are going to last, and what are something that we are kind of outgrown as a society? This energy is really at play during this eclipse. So again, notice just the feeling of like, oh my God, like what's happening? Like this feeling of just like, of just kind of like general craziness that we've just kind of been feeling. And this is really like the last kind of peak of that. And then Saturn and Uranus finally are moving on, but this eclipse is really, really connected to that. So for you personally, you've been having a breakdown of structures or a rebuilding of structures, depending on where Saturn and Uranus is in your chart, which I'm going to kind of allude to when I talk about your sign. So Aries rising, okay, I'm just taking a breath. So lunar eclipse for Aries rising. So it's in your opposite house. So it's going to be in you could be completing something or culminating something relating to your income, or just an awareness, something with your income or with your spending. This could be something related to your budget or your assets, or kind of your possessions. Taurus, this can be a major letting go of something, a big completion, a culmination, maybe just feeling more emotional with this eclipse. You may also be dealing with things in your career, like the weight of responsibility in your career as well, because Saturn will be in your 10th house. So it's like you as a person versus kind of what is going on in career. These two things are going to be very much interplaying. You can have a significant ending or culmination, or something relating to who you are as a person and your relationships around this eclipse. Lunar eclipse for Gemini rising. So this is going to be in your mental health sector. So this eclipse is saying get some rest and stop grinding so hard, is kind of what it feels like to me, because there's a lot of interplay with Gemini rising about your daily grind and kind of where you toil versus your need for rest and retreat, and working on mental health and your subconscious beliefs. Cancer rising, big realizations or culminations relating to your friendships, who really is a friend to you, who's really your ally, about the groups that you belong to, clubs and organizations, as well as your online communities. And you could also be shifting your goals right now too, because the 11th house is also hopes, wishes, and goals for the future. Leo rising, this is in your career sector. So this could be a culmination for you. This could be, a sudden realization about your career or your worldly ambitions. This could be a change in your reputation. When I say reputation, that means it could be, like when a person goes from being single to married, their public status and reputation changes. When a person gets divorced, their public status and reputation changes. If you have a sudden gain in your finances, your status changes. You're like, oh, I'm like this big baller now. Versus, if you lose some money, or if you lose a fortune, it's like my status again is changing, right? So definitely something with your status and your reputation, some sort of attainment or culmination, or just awareness, I would say, around your career. Virgo, your full moon stuff, your lunar eclipse stuff is in your higher education sector. So do something with your higher education, with your beliefs, your spiritual understanding and philosophy. You could be finishing something up relating to like a travel plan or anything relating to publishing or broadcasting. Libra, this is in your 8th house. So again, these eclipses for you, along with Aries, are about your finances. And for you, this could be something coming up around taxes, around applying for a loan, finding out if you get the loan, finding out if you're get financing for something. It could be something revolving around other people's assets and money. And again, anything related to those really deep areas of life around hidden emotions, around processing grief or something of that nature. But it's something financial, or it is something relating to the other 8th house matters around like that metaphorical death and transformation that's happening. For Scorpio rising, something is changing in your partnership sphere. And this could also be about your clients as well. If you work in a client-based business, it's not just relationships like romantic or personal, it is also business. So you could be noticing something changing in how you work with clients, something changing in how you work with your romantic partnerships. Something could be coming up in partnerships for sure. In like your romantic life, you could be finding that you're making a decision to leave someone or change a relationship, or that you just change your relationship status in general. But it is definitely more focused on your relationships, in which you have had a lot of activity all year. I think Gemini Cancer may be reversed. Hold on, maybe I did. Hold on, let's see. Nope. Hold on. Well, let's see. Gemini. Nope, that's right. Because someone's saying I think Gemini Cancer may be reversed I'm thinking in my mind. So Gemini rising, Taurus would be the Taurus rising. Taurus would be the 12th house. No, I was right. Yeah. Yep. Okay. Okay. So Sagittarius. Sagittarius would be wow, I'm like thrown off now. Okay, Sagittarius rising. This would be in your work and health sector. Hold on, maybe you're right. Gemini. Nope. Okay. Sagittarius rising. So you have Taurus ruling your 6th house. So this is going to be things coming up with your day job. This could be letting go of a day job, letting something changing in your work environment, an employee or coworker changing, or something relating to these things. Something coming up with your physical health, or something again coming up with a pet. We also have Capricorn rising, again, a lot of activity in your 5th house and your 11th house all year long. So this could be something coming up with, 5th house is like romance. It's anything relating to romance and sexual energy, things, your creative projects, your creativity, and things that you give birth to. Something coming up with your children as well. Perhaps there's something that's going on in their lives versus yours. And then also like your source of pleasure and recreation and joy. There's definitely a lot kind of coming up with these Taurus eclipses for you. Aquarius, this would be in your home and family sector. So culmination of completion of something relating to either your real estate, your domicile, your physical home, or your idea of home, your family. And then again, if you're working like doing ancestor work or something related to that as well. Finally, Pisces rising, this has to do with your communication, with your decision making. It could be something coming up just in your local community. It could be that you're, have finished something that you're studying, and that you're learning something new that you're really interested in. Or it could be something with having to do with your siblings or extended family as well. So let's go ahead and look at my chart. And again, if anyone has questions, go ahead, but I'm going to pull my chart up here. Let's pull me up. Okay, share my screen again. Share. Okay, so I have my chart pulled up here for the internet and everyone to look at. So if you're listening to the audio of this, by the way, you may want to look at the visual, but I'll try my best to describe it to you. So if you don't know what I'm talking about when I say what house Taurus rules in your chart, what house Scorpio rules. So this is really only applicable if you know your birth time, if you know your ascendant, right? So Since I have Scorpio rising, Scorpio rules my first house. So Taurus is the opposite sign. So you're going to look for the sign of Scorpio to find out what house Scorpio is ruling, to kind of find out where these eclipses are. So I found Scorpio here right on the first. And it's so Taurus is going to be the opposing sign. So my eclipses are going to be found across my first and seventh houses. First house of self, seventh house of relationships. And again, like your chart may look different than mine, but the one I recommend in AstroSeek is going to look pretty similar. And it will actually kind of spell it out for you too. It's like it'll have like more text and kind of grids to kind of explain things, but I like to use kind of like the wheel. Also, if you are wanting to know what house that Mars is going to be retrograde in, you're going to look this little line here, this little kind of slice of pie. Where are you finding that Gemini glyph? That Gemini glyph is going to look like, it's one after Taurus. It's going to look like, like the Roman numeral 2, essentially, the sign of the twins. So this is the house in your chart that Gemini is going to, that Mars is going to retrograde. Also helpful with that Mars retrograde stuff that I mentioned. You're going to maybe want to also just kind of note, don't obsess. I would say note, don't obsess. Note the houses in your chart that where you have Aries. So you're going to look at the little kind of ram kind of symbol here. So because Aries rules the 6th, and I have Scorpio on the 1st, that Mars retrograde transit, because those are the signs that Mars rules. So you're going to want to consider those house meanings as well. I can't go through all of them right now. I may just Google. So if you notice Aries, say on your 11th house cusp, you may just want to Google 11th house, kind of what it means. And again, but kind of look at, just kind of note the houses that Aries and Scorpio rules in your chart for this Mars and Gemini stuff. So before I move on, just kind of general questions and peeking at people's charts, I wanted to mention, where is my presentation? Here we go. The show. I wanted to, okay, hold on. Okay, yeah, it's not worth it. I basically wanted to mention, it's a free webinar. There are 2 things I wanted to mention. If you wanted deeper insight on, they're like, oh, I got a lot of stuff going on. I wonder what's happening with this eclipse. I'm doing eclipse readings. It's basically kind of looking at this kind of general time frame, what I'm seeing in your chart, what's coming up for you, looking at the energy of the coming months for this Mars retrograde and these eclipses. That you can book on my website at $75. You can kind of tailor it to whatever kind of focus you want, or I'm just looking generally and kind of talking to you about what I see. And keep my chart. And also, if you feel like tipping, you definitely can. So it's a free webinar. You definitely don't have to because it's free, but if you feel generous and you have the means, I have a tip jar on my links on my Instagram and TikTok. It says tip jar for Venmo or PayPal or Cash App. So you can feel free to do that as well. I welcome it. Otherwise, you don't have to. So, okay. I'm going to peek at a couple charts here. So this is kind of part where I'm done with the presentation and I can take a look at your chart for you if you want, if you're on this live. So does anyone have a question about anything we talked about? If you're looking at your chart and like, I don't know what the hell you're saying, can you please help me? I have some time and we can go through some of that. So, and you can feel free to unmute yourself at this point if you want and ask a question over audio. So, and I just
one question.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I'm just verbally processing out loud, and I probably don't actually want to hear the real answer. So my husband's going in for a minor